Are you looking to learn more about spasmodic dysphonia? Then you're in the right place. Stick around and we'll talk about what spasmodic dysphonia is, how to get evaluated, and what the treatment options are. Hello, I'm Stacy Menton from singingmamashomestead.com, and today we're going to talk a little bit about spasmodic dysphonia. So let's first start off with what is spasmodic dysphonia. Spasmodic dysphonia is a neurological voice disorder. There are different voice changes depending on the type of spasmodic dysphonia that you have. There are three main types. The first is adductor, adductor spasmodic dysphonia. The second type is abductor spasmodic dysphonia or abductor. And then there's a mixed spasmodic dysphonia. Adductor spasmodic dysphonia includes phonation breaks and sounds like the voice is strained, almost like you're pushing just a little bit, and there's specific voice breaks there. Abductor spasmodic dysphonia usually has a very breathy vocal quality, especially after voiceless consonants. And then mixed spasmodic dysphonia is usually a little bit of each kind, so it can vary depending on how bad the abductor type and adductor type are in your case. All right, so let's talk about what causes spasmodic dysphonia. And unfortunately, the answer is that we don't know yet. Researchers are constantly trying to figure all of this out, and there is definitely a lot of research being done. They are looking at potentially genetic components, as well as several different areas of the brain that seem to contribute to these symptoms. Those areas include the basal ganglia, which is responsible for regulating movement. And then there's the cerebellum, which is responsible for kind of perfecting movement and coordination and balance. Then there's the cortex, which is responsible for initiation of the movements, and then also it's responsible for some sensation that you feel from the muscles. So in terms of the treatment options, there are kind of three main options at this point, and sometimes people do a little bit of several. One of the treatments, and the gold standard treatment, is Botox injection. Botox, or botulinum toxin, is a neurotoxin that is injected into the vocal fold muscle. The muscle either underneath the vocal folds, in the case of adductor spasmodic dysphonia, or into what's called the posterior cricoarytenoid muscle back here. Usually only one side for that one. And that injection kind of kills the communication between the nerve and the muscle, which actually reduces the spasms that you're experiencing, whether that be an adductor spasmodic dysphonia, where the vocal folds seem to want to compress more than they should, causing those stops. That requires Botox injection into the true vocal folds, into the muscle underneath the true vocal folds. Abductor or abductor spasmodic dysphonia is usually done on one side when it comes to the Botox injection, because the posterior cricoarytenoid muscle that the laryngologist is going to inject is actually responsible for opening the vocal folds, and we don't want to weaken both sides because there's the potential that your vocal cords would be stuck in a closed position, which would cause significant breathing difficulty for quite some time until the Botox wears off, and then you might need a trach. So it's always good to just stick to one side, usually for the abductor type. Then the mixed type, they might try a little bit of Botox in both areas, a little bit into the true vocal folds and a little bit into the posterior cricoarytenoid, usually unilaterally. The next option, Botox is the gold standard at this point, but the next option would be some voice therapy. Sometimes this is really helpful after an injection especially. So you get the injection done first and it kind of kills off the spasms a bit, but you may still have some additional muscles that are trying to help out because they've learned to do that and they don't want to let go. And that usually sounds like this, even though you've had a Botox injection, because the false vocal folds and other muscles inside the throat aren't Botoxed, so there's nothing wrong with their movement, so they continue to work the way they did. And so sometimes it helps to go through some voice therapy to reduce the extraneous muscle tension while the Botox is doing its job for the spasms. And then hopefully from there you've learned enough that you don't need further voice therapy every time you get a Botox injection, but that you can get your Botox injections and that will fix the problem from then on. A third option in terms of treatment is there are some surgeries that can be done. In the case of abductor spasmodic dysphonia, I've seen laryngologists every once in a while decide to actually inject the vocal folds, which brings them closer together, and so those spasms aren't as noticeable because the vocal folds are a little closer together. That works in some cases. There's also some laryngologists in the US anyway that are doing nerve reconstruction surgeries. Those are big surgeries and they don't always work, but there's the chance that they could re-innervate the area so that it gets a better impulse from the brain and from the nerves. And by changing out the nerve path, you're fixing the problem. It's a possibility. I encourage you though, in terms of which type of treatment to pursue, I'd highly encourage that you go see your laryngologist and your voice team. They're going to be the best ones when it comes to who should evaluate and treat this. It's a laryngologist, and ideally a fellowship trained laryngologist, who is going to then go in and they're going to take a good look at your vocal folds to make sure that that is the true diagnosis. They're going to make recommendations based on your specific case. A lot of times laryngologists work with a speech pathologist, and we work together in an effort to provide care all the way around. So the laryngologist may say, well, I think that Botox is your best bet, but you have a lot of extra muscle tension, and so we'll have to see, but maybe it might be a good idea after a few weeks after your injection to trial some voice therapy while the Botox is still really strong and doing its job for your voice. So you really want to get evaluated and treated by a fellowship trained laryngologist for this condition. The bottom line, unfortunately, there is no cure for spasmodic dysphonia, but we can really reduce the symptoms to the point where people are able to go through with their activities of daily living without having to stop doing something or reduce how frequently they do something with their voice. Our voices are constantly being bombarded with all the things we need them to do these days, whether it be Zoom meetings or in-person meetings or talking on the phone, or ordering something through a drive-through. Any of those things are going to require that your voice work, and with spasmodic dysphonia, a lot of times it doesn't work well. So going through with these treatments is usually very effective in improving your vocal quality to reduce the chance of your voice causing you difficulty with your activities of daily living. In the end, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about spasmodic dysphonia, I'd highly recommend that you go to dysphonia.org. I'll put a link in the description below. This is the National Spasmodic Dysphonia Association, and they do some great work, and they've got examples and everything on their website. So if you're looking for more information, I'd recommend checking them out. All right, well, that about does it for today, and I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.